Often what ends up happening is that applications and new thinking around technology comes from the operations side of things, which is great because they see the problems and they see the potential of the technology to apply that. But doing that in a very ad hoc and haphazard fashion. So I guess at the end of the day, we haven't really been terribly strategic about how we deploy technology.
What happens when the future of aging arrives before we're ready? From robots that remember your life story to AI scribes that free up caregivers, technology is advancing faster than most senior living providers can keep up with. But what if being slow to adopt isn't caution, it's a missed opportunity?
Welcome to From Leads to Leases, a CCR growth podcast that helps senior living providers transform their complex challenges into opportunities. Listen in for stories from industry leaders, innovative strategies, and insights. And with our expertise, learn how to increase occupancy faster, guaranteed.
Welcome back to another episode of From Leads to Leases, the podcast that dives deep into the senior living and senior care industries, bringing you insights, strategies, and stories from the experts at the forefront of innovation, leadership, and care. I'm your host, Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth, a full-service marketing and growth agency that is exclusive to the senior living industry. And through this podcast, I'm here to guide you through the evolving landscape of senior care, exploring the innovations, strategies, and leadership insights that are shaping the future of the industry. All right, today's guest is Phil Vlach, founder of AgeTech Labs, leader of AgeTech Toronto, and head of technology at Schlegel Villages, one of Canada's leading senior living organizations. Phil is dedicated to turning the promise of AgeTech into practical strategies that improve resident experience, support staff, and help operators succeed. His work focuses on building bridges between innovators and providers, ensuring technology truly works in real-world care environments. So, Phil, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jerry. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you here. This is such a prevalent topic right now. A lot of my peers just got back from Smash and they're all excited about data and AI and tech. And I think some of the things that we're going to talk about today will be pretty interesting to a lot of folks. So I think the first thing I'd like to talk to you about a little bit is just the technology gap in senior living. I know that there's a lot of operators out there. They're operating on outdated systems. They're not sure how to evaluate those systems or how to adopt new technology. And that hesitation creates real risks for both residents, families, as well as for the community itself. Why do you think senior living operators lag behind other industries in adopting new tech?
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. That's a great question. And I'm so glad you asked it. First I'll say that it is such an exciting time in technology these days. And I know it can be a bit scary or a bit, people can feel a little bit on their hind feet or on their heels on that, but it's really the potential for technology to play such an impactful role in this industry has never been greater, I think. So great lead in with the Smash comment. Yeah. And, our industry, it's interesting, because I think there's so much potential for us to use technology to enable our industry even further than we have today. And part of the challenges that we're seeing now and the gaps, as you mentioned, is that, our business is a people first business. And so having grown up that way over time, the focus has been on that person-centered interaction and will continue and still continues and needs to continue to be so. There has been less focus, I think, on technology as an enabling contribution to that because of that people first focus. And the reality is that we're facing a couple of coincident challenges in the industry. One is the population is aging, so there's demand for our services as an industry, and that will continue to grow as the peak of the baby boomers come through. We have challenges on the staffing and resource side, and those will continue as well. There's simply not enough people in care or other functions within our communities and villages to really staff up appropriately. And so this is really where I see technology as playing that supporting, enabling role, right? It's not technology for technology's sake. And it's really the opportunity for technology to come in and backstop our teams and create better experiences for our residents and our teams. So back to your question about the gaps, though. The gaps, I think, is we have seen some improvements around the use of technology and the adoption through COVID, obviously, but that has been only through a segment of technology applications. And like I said, because we've been more of a care-based and people-based environment, the focus on technology has really been on keeping the basics going, right? So if community is fortunate enough to have an IT team, because many still don't, I would say, but they're probably focused on mostly keeping the computers running. If you have Wi-Fi, they're focused on keeping the Wi-Fi up and running. They may be resetting passwords. They're doing the support and maintenance functions. They're not thinking strategically. And often what ends up happening is that applications and new thinking around technology comes from the operations side of things, which is great because they see the problems and they see the potential of the technology to apply that. But doing that in a very ad hoc and haphazard fashion creates this sprawl of tech in our communities that then becomes even more harder to manage by the limited IT teams. And so so I guess at the end of the day, we haven't really been terribly strategic about how we deploy technology.
I've been in marketing for almost 3 decades, and through my agency, I've helped some of the largest senior living providers attract qualified leads and fill rooms faster while lowering their acquisition costs. But one thing kept bothering me. While working with larger communities, I kept meeting smaller operators, 10 to 50 bed communities that were struggling to compete with the big box providers because they don't have the same budget, staffing, or support behind them. And as a small business owner myself, I get that. You're wearing 5 different hats, you're trying to fill rooms while still giving great care, and that's exactly why we built Growthly. Growthly takes everything we've learned from helping large operators fill their buildings and makes it accessible to smaller communities without retainers, without long-term contracts or inflated costs. It's a performance-based partnership, and you only pay when we deliver move-ins. We help you stand out online, stop depending on referral agencies, bring in qualified families, and fill your community faster. Growthly is built for your small community and designed for big results. Learn more at growthlyseniorliving.com. It is interesting. I found a data point from Leading Age from last year that said that, 80% of long-term care operators identify tech adoption as a top challenge, but less than 30% actually have a strategy in place, which doesn't surprise me. I mean, that's like most businesses don't advertise or have a website that's fully optimized either. It just kind of comes with the territory. Aside from having a people first focus, though, do you think the gap exists in this industry because there's a gap in tech adoption for the residents themselves? Do you think that communities maybe don't see it as much of a sticking point for them because their residents aren't asking for it as much?
Yeah, that's a really interesting consideration. So most residents, I think, are probably somewhere in their 80s, typically, that are living in our communities. For that generation, I would say tech adoption is still not at what I would think is the mainstream level. It's more, the phone is still the killer app, is the kind of way I think about it. And because residents are comfortable using phones, they're comfortable using computers. Many are comfortable using tablets and so on, but they don't come from the technology first generation like our kids do, for example, now. What do they know? They've grown up with technology in their hands. And so yeah, for sure, there is less adoption at the resident level, but I think the big opportunity for operators is really in their organizations and for their team members, as well as providing some functionality and services from a technology perspective to residents as well. And I think that's also accelerating. That adoption and that desire for technologies is accelerating also with the baby boomers coming in. And I foresee that we'll be seeing a lot more requests and requirements around technology being brought in by residents, and how do we actually accommodate that coming into our communities as well.
Because we're kind of on this cusp of where tech is really starting to proliferate across the industry. I mean, what's the cost of doing nothing when it comes to tech adoption?
Yeah. So I think the cost of doing nothing is, the first is really tactical. I think you are limiting the capability of that people first interaction by your teams with your residents. So, and I'll give you an example. At Schlegel Villages, we came out of COVID and we had difficulty filling the services team for dining at one of our villages. So it's our largest village, and we would typically need about 8 people on the floor for service during dinner and lunch. And we were only getting about 4. And then we were augmenting with agency for 2 others. And so we're still short staffed. And that caused the service to be a bit hurried. So the experience by the residents was not, I think, what I would call optimal from a service experience perspective. The team felt very busy and almost run off their feet. So there were there were problems on both sides of that. And so what we did is we brought in food service robots, and what they were able to do is cut down on that, bringing food to the table side, and then also for clearing as well and busing back to the dish pit. And so what ended up happening was that it freed up our team members, instead of running back and forth between the servery and the table side, to simply be able to serve table side in a much calmer way to our residents. And that created a much better resident engagement experience as well. So it was a win-win on both sides. And after the novelty wore off, after about a month for both sides of that, we've had them there for 2 years, going on 3 years now, actually. And the residents still love them. The team members feel that the robots are actually part of the service delivery team, and it's just worked out super well. And that's, for me, that's a great example of the role technology can play in enabling better experiences for our team members and for our residents living with us.
That's such a great point. And thank you for sharing that example, just because I feel like so many people who don't understand tech adoption really look at it as the enemy, right? It's like it's here to replace something that someone else is doing. It's like, no, we're in a people first industry. So the whole point is to create more meaningful interactions, human to human, and less time spent doing those, meaningless or tasks that can be automated or systemized in some way that a human being doesn't necessarily have to have their hands in.
I think, and that's exactly it, Jared. I think you've totally nailed it there, because if you approach technology from that perspective, you'll see opportunities across your organization and your business to create those leverage points and actually to insert technology where it frees up your teams to do something better, something either delivery wise better for the residents, spend more time with the residents, have better outcomes, and so on. And it's not about replacing. I never think about technology as replacing people. It is there to support and give them superpowers. And I think, and AI is on that, on that journey as well, I think, in different places within the value stream of our businesses as well. So if we approach tech from that mindset and we ask, what is the problem that we're trying to solve and how do we go about solving it? And sometimes tech is the right answer and sometimes it's not. Then, we're driven by solving the problem and generating better outcomes for our teams and for our residents.
I want to talk a little bit. I mentioned in the intro about AgeTech Labs. So you've created this platform. As I understand it, it's essentially a translator between startups and operators that it helps vendors who are looking to get into the senior living tech space understand the realities of care, and also help operators make sense of the new tools that might be at their disposal. Am I summarizing that correctly? Are there other components to it?
Yeah, I think the opportunity there that I saw was to help share the approach of strategy and looking at different tools within the industry and how we approach technology, to share that more broadly with the industry. And so I work day to day within the operator environment. As you mentioned, I lead the technology team at Schlegel Villages, and I'm very focused on applying technology within the context of senior living. This is AgeTech Labs is my platform for helping scale up and scale out that knowledge. And so within that, I have an insights blog where I try to share either best practices, new technologies, or other relevant things with the industry. And within there, I've also built out a few tools that are really designed to help operators and innovators think through, what are the big challenges and how do I go about solving these problems? And they're really based on what I've gone through at Schlegel Villages, primarily using, so for example, using a framework to do the assessment of new technologies and thinking through the why primarily, and then the how and the what and the outcomes. And they've, I've codified them into simple to use chat interfaces. And I call them community-based tools because They're free to use. Like organic food, they may have some defect or odd things that you might find here and there, but I test them regularly, and I've had good feedback. But the point there is really to try to help the industry level up in their thinking around technology and really make it a bit more structured and what I would refer to as kind of a systems approach, right? Not just one technology versus another or one app versus another.
No, I love that you're doing that, and I love that you're addressing both sides of the issue because there was a data point when I was researching for this episode, 2023 AgeWell study that said that 65% of age tech startups fail to scale because they lack access to real world senior living environments to test solutions. So I think it goes both ways, right? And I mean I've interviewed a bunch of small tech startups for senior living, and a lot of them have said, yeah, we've had trouble getting in to do case studies or to even prove the efficacy of what it is that we're trying to build. So
Yeah.
that's been a big challenge. What's like the biggest misunderstanding that you often see between innovators and operators or vendors and operators?
Yeah. And I loved your example of the startups trying to get in to scale and do pilots. And we are a very pilot heavy industry, which is great. I think everybody is interested in trying new things on the operator side. But I do think sometimes we don't line up the way we talk to each other very well. And so I find sometimes my role is really a bit of translator for both sides. And on the operator side, what we're really interested in is outcomes. We're interested in, okay, it's not the tech for tech's sake. It's what outcomes are you going to drive for my business, my residents, and my team? And how are we going to demonstrate that? And then on the innovator side, sometimes it's more about features and functionality and a bit the gee whiz factor, right? Which we all love, by the way. Don't get me wrong. It's just that doesn't always translate into the outcomes that we're looking for. And so what I try to do is really level set both sides and work with both sides through AgeTech Labs and through the tools that I built is really to try to help put each other in the other's shoes, right? So operators, for example, don't want you to come to them and say, I have all this features and functionality and I have an app and it has a great dashboard. And I don't know how many times over the last several years, I've told startups that that's lovely, but what am I going to do with it? So how do I take that, that functionality that you've built that may be terrific, but then like, how do I actualize it in my business? In my organization? What does my team do with it? And when I see my team, I mean my team members, for example, on a clinical side. So if I get a dashboard that shows, I don't know, for example, how many times people get out of bed. Okay, interesting data point, but what am I supposed to do with that from an operational perspective? And I think that's where I try to work with startups to try to explain to them that you need to sort of follow that through in the description of your product, because that's really what's going to happen within the operating environment, whether it's in a pilot or a full deployment. You're going to run into that already. So you may as well start thinking about how you're going to address it as you go through it.
I think this industry is plagued with point solution products, that don't talk to each other. Even on the marketing side, we have some clients who have 8, 9, 10 different pieces of tech running in their stack, and none of them are talking to each other. So it just creates a major disconnect. Like you're saying, like, this is a great data point, but where do we put this and how do we apply it to the rest of our care package that we're putting together for our residents?
Yeah. And I have, there's a framework that I developed, or kind of a way of thinking about this that I developed that I call the layer cake framework or the layer cake strategy around tech. And very briefly, and I try to make it relatable. So everybody knows what a layer cake looks like pretty much. And you have the top layer, which is your icing. And this is the first thing you see. This is the thing that gets you excited. And this is your user experience layer in tech. So what we want to do is make sure that layer is consistent across each group area, if you will. So for example, your dining team or your food services team has the same experience across the apps that they use or the app that they use to do their work. The clinical team may have a completely different look and feel and app, but it's the same for their team. So wherever functionally you see the teams coming together, you would try to have that icing layer be consistent. And so that creates a much better user experience, and it reduces cognitive load for the users as well, which also helps you mitigate burnout in your team members through app switching, right? So that's the first one. I would say the middle one is kind of cool because you can have strawberry, vanilla, chocolate, all sorts of different flavors within the middle, and that represents your functionality. And this is, I think, what you were alluding to is, one CRM is not the only and best CRM for the industry. The first operator may prefer one CRM, the second operator, because of the way they do business or whatever, they prefer another CRM, and so on. And so this gives you the opportunity to, or should give you the opportunity to mix those CRMs, right? So the first operator takes the first CRM, but they still manage to create a consistent user interface for their team members, and so on. And so, and then finally, the layer cake sits on a board, and the board underpins the entire cake. And what that represents is really your data layer. Because part of the issue with having all these different applications is not just the front end, but also the data end. And the data end essentially means that if all of your data is trapped in each individual application, or it's a silo, and the data will never talk to each other. And so you're not able to unlock those rich insights from all of that data coming together at the same time. And it positions you poorly to be able to run AI now and in the future across all of that data to get insights. So I would say if you think of a layer cake and you can harmonize the user experience, then mix and match the middle, and then harmonize the data experience, that should be your guiding light for your strategic design for tech.
I love that. And I feel like that would probably improve response times across the board, no matter what it is you're doing. If you can analyze and consume all of that data together, right? Instead of the small chunks and try to interpret how this plays off of this. And yeah, that's amazing. I love that. Thank you. That's a great analogy.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I want to talk about, there's a concept that you spoke to me about last time, the 100-year life. Obviously, we know there's a lot more centenarians now than there were, and there's certainly going to be more coming. How does that idea of the 100-year life reshape the role of senior living communities?
Yeah. Okay. Time will tell. I think, but so the concept of the 100-year life, I think, is being talked about a little bit more these days, and I really appreciate that because research tells us that people born after 2000 are highly likely to live to 100 or into their 90s. And so that really flips the whole conversation around retirement, on its head, because the concept of retirement came out or was coined really in the 50s. And around that time, the life expectancy was really kind of mid 60s, I would say. And so that's why that age, the reference age of 65, came about as well. And if we start thinking about living to 100, then you have a full third of your life in front of you post, what we would call traditional retirement. And so that, for me, that first represents a completely untapped market because we've never had this before. And so we're all going to be going through it for the first time together in the very near future. And people after retirement in that third, if you will, are looking for purpose and are looking for meaning. And so it's not, I think it changes the concept of people coming into our communities as well. And there's really the opportunity to have a much longer thread with people coming into senior living that might include opportunities like have them moving through different parts of continuum care, from independent living to assisted to memory care and so on, but also to provide much richer and different experiences through that journey. And I think what we'll see over time is, and we're starting to see it already, is the capability of providing personalized journeys, whether it's personalized wellness or personalized care or personalized dining. These are all becoming much more attainable, I would say, with certain tools on the technology side than they have been before. And integrating them also, to our earlier point, is also becoming much easier and doable. you have to be judicious about how you arrange that, but it is possible. Uh, so one, you know, one, so I think that's going to change how we approach residents coming to our communities. I think residents, you know, to our earlier conversation, residents will also come to our communities with their own technology. So we're already seeing people come into senior living with their Alexas, their Google Homes, sometimes their Roombas, and so the question is, you know, what do we do with that, and are we able to leverage that into a holistic plan for them and a holistic experience for them within our communities, or do we just say you can bring it in, but it's not going to work with anything else, right?
Yeah.
Or even, you know, people obviously, Apple Watches are very common these days, or smartwatches, and people do track their fitness or their movement. So if a resident comes into a community and says, I brought my Apple Watch, can I integrate that into my care record? How are you going to address that?
I think it's an interesting point too, because there was a study done a couple of years ago. I remember reading, I can't remember the exact data point, but older adults who live in senior living communities have a higher life expectancy already than those who don't. And they also have higher access to more advanced healthcare and more advanced technology than the average older adult who's living on their own. So I think the tech part of it is a big piece of what's going to help people with longevity, because they're going to live safer, safer lives in the long run. If there's all these, especially within a community, because there's all these monitoring type of technologies that are going to help recognize things maybe before, the person even sees that there's an issue with their elevated heart rate, or there's all these different ways to fall prevention and to sense when things happen immediately, rather than somebody laying on the floor now for an hour before a nurse or CNA comes and helps them up. Now it's within minutes. So response times have dramatically reduced, and I can only imagine with time that's going to get better and better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's a great example, because the use of sensors has enabled us to actually get in front of a lot of this stuff too. So we've been able to move, or we are able to move from a reactive stance to a much more proactive stance, which again is, I think that's where you can see the outcomes are very positive for the residents and also for the team members if you're presenting it in the right fashion.
And you brought up a good point too about, people bringing Apple Watches. I mean, I love all that tech. Like I'm definitely the guy who would bring all my stuff with me and not want to implement the things that are already there. So how are communities handling that now? And how do you think they need to shift their mindset culturally or just operationally because people are going to bring their watches. They're going to want to bring their robots, even their robot vacuums. Sometimes there's all sorts of tech that they might want to bring in with them.
Yeah. So I think operators need to think about their how can they structure themselves best to be able to accommodate that coming in. And so, one response could be, that's great, you can bring it in, but you use it on your own, we can't do anything with it. But I think we're going to see also a prevalence of other technologies coming in that are more assistive. Eventually, I think the robots will be more sophisticated that residents will be bringing in. I talk about this scenario and hypothetical scenario in 2030 where we have a prospect named Margaret, and she's 75 years old, and she's made the difficult decision to want to move from her home that she's been in for 45 years because her husband passed away a few years ago. She realizes that her social interaction is largely with the store clerk when she goes to buy milk, and that the last one of those was 4 days ago, and she gets that it's not the healthiest maybe setup for her. And so she makes the decision to move into senior living, but she has a companion that she already has brought on board named Sophie, which is a small robot that you can imagine kind of an animated Alexa or a Google Home that learns her stories and has been her companion for the last years, the way she's coped. So Sophie knows all of her stories. She knows that she prefers to take certain medications in the morning, others in the evening. She knows that her granddaughter helped her plant the garden last year, and she's looking forward to doing it again this year. Anyway, she knows her personal life, let's say, and she's become a very good friend. Well, when Margaret moves into senior living, she's bringing Sophie with her. And she's not only bringing Sophie with her, but she's bringing Buddy, because Buddy is her physical companion who helps her get things off the top shelf, or who fetches her reading glasses for her. And so she's bringing her entourage of robots with her, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah. I don't really actually think it's that far away. I mean, we used 2030 in that example, and I think it's not unrealistic. And
I don't
so,
either. I think,
yeah. And so I think for senior living operators, the question is how will you best position yourself to that new potential reality? And I think that'll be actually a market differentiation as well within the senior living space. In early days, I would say you may even, as an operator, want to provide some of your prospects that are on a waiting list something like a Sophie device, so that prior to moving in, it gets to know them a little bit. And not only does it help bridge that, sometimes stressful move-in period, but you now have a lot of individualized data for that resident that you can bring into your wellness planning or your care planning or your dining planning. And you can start personalizing those experiences from day one, not from, day 90 after they move in. I think it's just thinking through the possibilities and how do we approach that service experience or that user experience for the resident. But I think it'll be a very exciting time.
I agree. I think that's kind of stage one too. I mean, we do the same thing with marketing all the time. We look at low hanging fruit first and foremost. Where can we bridge the gap? What wins can we get, and how quickly can we get them? And I think if communities were thinking more in line with how can we integrate tech with this prospective resident before they even get here, how much easier of a time they would have with transition, I think, because that is a big challenge. I know for a lot of the communities we manage, there's a lot of resistance and fear around, the whole move and giving up the perception of giving up their freedoms or giving up their routines or their friends, their home, their possessions, whatever it is. There's often fears around that. So anytime we can mitigate that, I think that's pretty powerful.
Absolutely. And I think, in the meantime, though, I think what operators can do, there's, to your point about low-hanging fruit and some of our earlier discussion is there are opportunities within the workflows that we have now that can help still alleviate some of I would say, the repetitive burden of things and free up team members' time to start creating those personalized experiences one-on-one, right? At the individual level. And some of them include things like AI scribes. So, for example, one of the things that people have tried to do is do the point of care documentation. Well, that's difficult because anytime you're talking to a resident, the last thing you want to do is put a screen in between you and them, right? Whether
Yeah.
you're selling or whether you're doing care notes. So what ends up happening is the care team does their discussion with the resident, but then does documentation usually at the end of the shift, and that results in about 30% retention of whatever was discussed. And so you have lower fidelity of that information and you have a bit of a synopsis. And then additionally, at this time, you're not really able to translate that into the shift change huddles in a summarized format. Usually it comes out in, you have to go to some fields and some EHR and look through that. So I would say in the front part of that, you have the opportunity to use AI as a scribe for all those notes. And doctors do it in medical practice. And I think in our industry, we could do that as well and get better data into our systems, as well as reduce the burden on our teams to free them up to do better and more personalized care and interactions. So I think that's an example of low-hanging fruit that we could address today.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I think, that's one of the big hesitancies, I think, is for operators to really see that there are things that they can do that aren't going to disrupt the entire system. You had talked about a Lego block tech strategy, and I think that's probably more or less what you're alluding to with, there are things you can do right now. There's pieces that we can fit into this while maybe we take one thing out, we put one new thing in, but we keep all the other systems the same. And then piece by piece, we start to build this better, smarter, more robust system. Tell me about that philosophy and why would a modular tech architecture be more sustainable for operators?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And because as we go, if we refer back to our layer cake approach of things, it's kind of that middle layer. We talked about moving things or having different flavors in there. Same idea with the Lego block strategy. So if you think about some current systems that you're using, often they lock you into one vendor, fixed functionality, and you're at the mercy of that vendor, or you're basing your evolution of that product on their timeline. Not really the most efficient thing to do. And what modular architectures or composable architectures like Lego do is talk about, if we have features and functionality in one system, but the connectors are the same, like with Lego. So if you imagine a Lego block, the connectors are always the same, regardless of the shape of the block or the color of the block or what it's used for. The connector is the same. And that's the key. Those are the interface points between applications or APIs, often they're called. And those allow you to really connect those Lego blocks together. So you can imagine, like we talked about before, is that you may have an EHR that serves you well today, but tomorrow you want to add in a fall detection system on top of that and have it interface to your EHR. Well, the strategic approach to that and the modular approach to that would say, try to find, that fall detection system or sensor system that connects already into your EHR, if that's where you need those connections to happen. And if you continue to do that over time, you build a resilient technology stack that allows you to flex and adapt to the changing needs of your business and the changing needs of your residents and your team members as well. Because in 2 years, that sensor-based or fall detection system may no longer serve your needs, and you may wish to swap that out. And in order for that to be as simple as possible and as minimally disruptive as possible, if you've picked the Lego block approach of that, then you're able to do it with the next system and the next system. And if you continue doing that, like I said, that really frees you up to be flexible and adaptable to that changing future.
How can providers avoid locking themselves into outdated systems? That's been a big issue too for a lot of like a nurse call system, for example. It's such a big technological install, and usually comes with a multi-year contracts. How can this system help them avoid those types of situations?
So I would say that you need to do your homework before you engage with your vendor. So, I mean, if it's a different scenario, if you're already in that kind of system, then you need to work with your vendor to try to get them to at least build some functionality that allows you to onboard and incorporate things in a modular fashion. But if you're looking for new systems, then I think that's really where the opportunity is to structure your requirements so that you ask all of the questions up front and be intentional about asking about interfaces and APIs and asking about how they integrate and what their roadmap is. And even looking for potentially ecosystem type evolutions where some vendors have created these interactions and integrations already with an ecosystem of partners that may suit your needs.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes total sense. I think my last question for you is looking towards the future. I know we kind of talked about what that resident might look like in 2030. I think communities, obviously, that adopt technology early, they're not just going to operate more efficiently, they're going to differentiate themselves, through like that personalized resident experience. How do you see early adopters positioning themselves in the marketplace, let's say 10 years from now? What does that look like?
I think it goes back to some of the things that we talked about a little in our conversation, which is really that it starts with gathering information about your resident and their journey with you. And I think that gives you that opportunity to create a resident 360 picture. And from there, you can start personalizing different outcomes or experiences for them, whether it's through dining or care, as we talked about, getting proactive around fall detection and that kind of thing. I mean, imagine if instead of now you print your menu and you put it up somewhere, imagine if your resident woke up in the morning and their AI companion told them, I see you haven't had a good night's sleep. It looks like you may be a bit more tired than usual. we're going to schedule your lunch for a slightly different time in the day that adapts better to your circadian rhythm. And we understand, and we know that because you haven't slept well, your optimal cognitive time for activities is really shifted from your day normally. And so we're going to schedule different activities at that time. And we've also noticed that your omega-3 level is a little lower than usual. So we're going to propose salmon for lunch, for example. So those experiences are now getting tailored to the resident at different times and at different, I guess, points within their day. To your earlier point, it creates not only better outcomes, but improved longevity and health span, and just a better wellness and overall experience for the resident. And I think this is a journey. There's no like magic pill to get there, right? There's
Yeah.
no magic tech to get there. I think operators that start trying these things a little bit here, a little bit there, and building their experience and understanding what works for them and how to manage that change, both from their team's perspective and their resident perspective, how they go to market with those changes as well. I think residents, operators that start doing that now will be leading in 10 years.
I think it's a huge differentiator too. I mean, we look now, I think probably 5, 10 years ago, everybody was trying to focus on their amenities. What amenities do they have in the community that are going to set them apart? And now everybody's pretty much made that a non-selling point because most communities are selling the same thing. They have the same set of amenities. And so now it's about the experience. What experience is this community offering? What's the culture like within the community? What's the staff like? What's the food like? And now what's the overall experience? And I think the tech is kind of the next gap that will bridge in terms of that experience, because that's such an easy way to just level up from someone else. I mean, you can have this one piece of tech in there that just sounds cool, new, exciting, and that could be the one thing that sets you apart from all the communities in your area. So I love that.
I think about a relatable analogy. I think for everybody has shopped online, right? Or has watched Netflix. And so it's really the opportunity to bring that next Netflix-like experience to the operator and the resident, right? Because when we have Netflix has an algorithm that sees what I've watched, creates suggestions for what I want, what they would propose I watch next, but I'm still in control of how I do that and what I end up watching. And I think that's where we want to make sure that we offer these opportunities to our residents, tech enabled in the background, and we still empower, and we empower them to have that agency to choose. I mean, that for me, that is the ultimate destination.
Yeah. And I feel like it's almost here now too, because there was I forgot to mention a survey that was done last year from AARP that said 70% of adult children consider technology-enabled care a deciding factor when choosing a community. So it's already something that they're already looking at and saying, what do you have in place? What are your future plans in terms of what you're going to be adopting, and how's that going to affect my loved one? So I think that's pretty important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Phil, my last question for you, where can our audience go to learn more about AgeTech Labs, AgeTech Toronto, Schlegel Villages, or connect with you directly?
Yeah. So for AgeTech Labs, it's agetechlabs.ca. All of our tools are on there, including Scout Spotlight, which is a product validation and strategy discussion tool that operators can leverage. And by the way, innovators like it too, because they get to put themselves in the shoes of the operator and what they might ask. So that's agetechlabs.ca. AgeTech Toronto is our meetup community that we host bi-monthly. And we bring together operators, innovators, investors, academia, and those interested in talking about tech in the industry. They can go to agetechconnect.com. We're part of a larger US-based organization, and you can find our community listed in the community section there. You can connect with us on LinkedIn as well. Schlegel Villages you can actually do virtual tours there as well if you're so interested. Schlegel Villages is schlegelvillages.com. And if you would like to reach me, or if your viewers would like to reach me, you can reach me at Phil@AgeTech Labs.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Phil. This is such a great interview. I really appreciate you bringing all the age tech into the forefront here. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to thank Phil Vlach for sharing his vision for bridging the gap between innovation and everyday care in senior living. From modular tech strategies to preparing for residents who bring their own devices, Phil's perspective reminds us that the future is already knocking at the door. So if you'd like to connect with Phil or learn more about his work at AgeTech Labs, Schlegel Villages, or AgeTech Toronto, we've included his LinkedIn and all of the website links in the show notes. As always, we hope you found this episode insightful and inspiring. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore the evolving world of senior care. And we cover everything from technology and leadership strategies to family support and the future of aging. Also, remember that From Leads to Leases isn't just an audio experience. We're a video podcast, so you can subscribe to our YouTube or Spotify channels if you want to watch the full episodes like the one here with Phil. I'm Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. Thank you for joining us on From Leads to Leases, and please like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might find it useful. Until next time, lead with strategy and with heart. Chat with you again soon. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks for listening to From Leads to Leases. Are you ready to fill your rooms faster and increase occupancy? Visit ccrgrowth.com to learn about our Senior Growth Innovation Suite, a proven system to generate highly qualified, tour-ready leads, accelerate sales, and reduce acquisition costs. Let's connect and turn your challenges into opportunities. See you next time.